We're going to get started. A couple housekeeping things before I introduce the panel. First of all, I want to thank everybody who took the time to come out today. There's a couple other events going on in Grandview, so the fact that you showed up for this means a lot to us. For those of you who don't know, my name is Louis Essig. I graduated in 2009. I am a Start Talking Grandview board member and a person in long-term recovery. Again, for those of you that don't know, Start Talking Grandview is a volunteer community organization whose purpose is to engage the community in conversation around substance misuse and its impacts. In hosting these community conversations, we help to reduce the stigma and better understand addiction and mental health. Thank you to the Grandview Heights Public Library for hosting this today. We're grateful for the partnership. And just so everybody is aware, we are filming the discussion. So any questions that you do ask during the Q&A that may be personal, they will be edited out of the video, so you don't have to worry about that. Very quickly, on a personal level, these conversations, we've been doing this for a couple of years, serve as a reminder that addiction doesn't discriminate. Anytime I get a microphone in my hand, I always want to bring that up. There's two former Grandview graduates up here right now who suffered from addiction and made it out on the other side. Unfortunately, statistics show that's not the norm. I personally lost many friends, a lot of them Grandview graduates, to this disease, and that's why we're here tonight. So it means a lot to us. It is my pleasure now to introduce our panel, star-studded panel. We have Manny Delavaris. Manny is a Grandview graduate who graduated in 2008. He's in long-term recovery and works at Maryhaven as the Vice President of Revenue Management. It's a very fancy title, Manny.
That's why you got the tie, right?
That's right.
Manny and I grew up together. We played sports together and ended up in the same boat with our addiction. I've had the privilege of watching Manny grow in recovery. And in my opinion, he very much embodies what recovery should look like. Next, we have Judge Sheryl Munson. After 26 years as a public defender, Judge Munson was elected to the bench of the Franklin County Court of Common Pleas and developed the first specialty mental health docket in Franklin County. This specialized docket is called RISE. That stands for Reaching Individual Success Every Day. It offers targeted treatment for moderate to high-risk felony offenders that have been diagnosed with serious mental illness, which was a primary factor leading to their involvement with the criminal justice system. On a personal level, I know Judge Munson cares. I've seen her work, and she cares about the people in the community and helping them and changing their lives. Lastly, but not least, is JoLynn Wheatley. JoLynn is a Grandview Height School District Mental Health Specialist. She serves our students and families K through 12. JoLynn oversees comprehensive programming, direct therapeutic intervention services to meet students' needs. JoLynn is with our students week in and week out and is a valuable resource for our students as they face day-to-day challenges. The best way that I know how to put it, again personally, is that JoLynn gets it. We've had many conversations, and it's obvious to me that she cares and she understands. Without anything else from me, I will turn it over to Manny.
Thanks, Louis. My name's Manny Delavaris. I'm a person in long-term recovery, Grandview Heights High School graduate, 2008. So initially, and I guess I misinterpreted this, Louis, I think, said there'd be 120 people here. So I was freaking out. That's pretty high stakes, but this is a lot easier. And so I'll really just give my experience being from Grandview and living in active addiction and now living in recovery. And so traditionally when I do this kind of stuff, I usually just go linear. I just start at the very beginning, but I think I want to start present day just so you guys can get to know me a little better. So I'm Manny, I'm 34, I'm from Grandview. A person in long-term recovery, and that's the most important thing in my life today because that's really all that allows me to live a life at all. I work at Maryhaven. I've had the pleasure of working there for 6 years, done many different things there, and it's all culminated in this role that I'm in now, Vice President of Revenue Cycle Management. It's an honor to serve in that way. It's different than I had originally intended to serve the addicted population, but it's still really important. I'm Uncle Funkle, excuse me, 6 nephews and 2 nieces. 2 are very new to this world, so they don't know that I'm the funkle yet, but they'll learn in due time. And so my family is a very important piece of my life today. I do a lot of things with them, and like really, I only can hope to be useful to them and to others around me, and that's really what drives me day to day. And I think I do that. You'd have to ask them for confirmation, but that's just a little bit about who I am. You know, just in my free time, other than doing kind of recovery-based work, helping the new person, just what was done for me. I love to golf. I love to play pickleball. It would be a huge stretch to say I was even mediocre at either of those things. But like I have a great time doing it, and so I think that's what, you know, recovery has allowed me to enjoy things that I once viewed as like, hey, man, that's really mundane, and if that's what my life is going to look like, I don't think I want it. So as I mentioned, I grew up in Grandview. I grew up right down the street, actually, on the corner of Ashland and Erland. When I was in 3rd grade, we moved to Glen Avenue, and so I think, you know, I was an up the hill kid. Lewis was a down the hill kid. You know, those down the hill kids had a certain reputation. Like they were a little rowdy, right? And like I was an uphill kid, so my nose was in the air, and I had a silver spoon in my mouth, whatever. But like looking back, and I didn't appreciate it in the moment. I don't think. Well, I definitely didn't. Looking back, like, you know, my family unit is incredible. My parents are wonderful people, amazing, still in my life today. I have 3 brothers and 1 sister who all do amazing things. And I was loved and supported, and I had everything I could have ever wanted materially. But you know, just, it was the norm for me, so I guess I just didn't really have like an appreciation for it until I got much older. So if you have young kids that are struggling with that, just hang in there. Like, you know, I came around, so anybody can come around. But like today, I really appreciate the fact that I'm from Grandview, and it provided a lot of opportunities I don't know that I would have otherwise had. And so to just kind of, you know, I think in the rooms of recovery, you hear all the time, like, I didn't fit in, and you know, I'm really one that believes like that's kind of just a general human experience of growing up. Like, everybody goes through self-esteem things, and I was really no different. You know, I went through my own self-esteem challenges and different things, but like really for the most part, I look at myself growing up and like it was ideal in a lot of ways. And so when I entered high school in 2004, I'd not drank or touched a drug or anything, and I had no intention of doing that because I have an uncle. He's still around today, but he's been in and out of prison and treatment and all sorts of things for as long as I've been alive, at least. And it was really sad because for me, he's my funkle, right? When he was around, it was a great time. He's a kid just like I was, and that's what I try to be for my nieces and nephews now. But then he would go away for a couple of years, and I didn't really get it in my child brain. It was like, why do you know, or why do you keep doing drugs and stuff when you know you end up in prison? That doesn't make any sense to me. But I guess it really like made me apprehensive to ever try it, because addiction does run in the family. After I might have learned that in DARE or something. It's maybe the only thing I remember from DARE. But you know, for me, my moral compass, my parents raised me, my moral compass was true north. And just to give a quick story to talk about that. So I don't know how long some of you have been around Grandview, but there used to be a little corner store right down the street called El Tombo. And my friends and I in middle school would love going there because they had glass bottles of Coca-Cola, which was like, you know, the coolest thing to an 11-year-old kid, I guess. And so in middle school, my friends would start stealing like little pieces of candy, like bits of honey and like pieces of bubble gum and like little stuff that, whatever, big deal. But for me, like I could not be a part of that. And so I stopped hanging around those people. There was just this thing inside me that like inherently, and it's because of the ways my parents raised me, inherently like I just followed the rules. That's what I did. I wanted to stay out of trouble. I wanted to be a good kid. And so that really sets the stage. I mean, and it's interesting when you find out what I became. But that's who I was, and that's who I am. That's how I was raised to be. So when I went to high school, you know, my first and last semester were the only or quarter, I think we're on quarters. We're the only quarters I didn't get straight A's, didn't get a 4.0, so like school, that kind of stuff just came really easily to me. I was friends with people in my grade, I was friends with people younger than me, older than me. Making friends came really easily to me. You know, my high school experience, truthfully, was great. You know, and again, to go along with like just how I was raised, I had perfect attendance in high school, which like, truthful, you know, I've done different things in recovery and in my professional career, but like that's truthfully probably the best accomplishment I've ever had. Because I have a really hard time now, admittedly, like getting out of bed at 7:30 to like go someplace that pays me to be there. But I showed up on time every day to school, and I wouldn't miss it. And that's who I was, and that's how I was raised. And I first experienced drinking here in Grandview, right up the street on Glen Avenue, when I was 16 years old. And you know, I was a pretty, I guess, normal Grandview kid. But what makes me different, I think, and I didn't know it at the time, was my initial reaction to alcohol. And so I remember it was about 3 beers deep in my first drunk. I was in my friend's kitchen, and I had this thought of just like, I don't understand why people don't want to do this all the time. Like, I feel so good. And so I know today, like, big red flag, right? Like, that's not normal. But for me, like, it was in that moment, you know, I woke up the next day, I felt horrible, I swore off drinking forever, and then, you know, by noon I felt better, and it was like, yeah, let's drink again tonight. And for me, those first 2 nights, I experienced my first blackouts, and that was really the story of my drinking. Is when I started to drink, I had little to no control over the amount that I took. And I tell my friends going into the night, like, oh yeah, I won't get that drunk tonight, but I always overshot the mark. And so for me, like, that was kind of the first warning sign, so to speak, is the things I committed to do, which was just drink socially, not black out, I could never do. I always overshot the mark. And so, as I mentioned, I did really well in school, and so I had the opportunity to go to, you know, my long love was Ohio State growing up. My grandfather, if any of you are familiar, is Jimmy Crum, so I was just I was raised to be a Buckeye, basically, and I always wanted to go to school there. So I applied for general admission to Ohio State, and they offered me a spot in the scholars program because of my grades, standardized tests, all that stuff. And I remember, you know, like looking back, like Cardale Jones catches a lot of heat for the whole, I didn't come to play school, I came to play football. But I totally get that because like I wasn't going to school to study. Like, you know, in the few times I drank in high school, I was really just going because I wanted to party. And I had a lot of friends on campus who told me about what a good time it was, and that's really all I was interested in doing. And so I didn't tell anybody I was accepted to the scholars program. I just went general admission, South Campus, because that's what I wanted to do. And again, it's here, like some red flags start coming up. So the perfect attendance kid, all of a sudden, Grandview gave out these scholarships to specific students, and there was an assembly to go receive the scholarship. And so, like, me at my core, like, I should definitely be there because that's an honor and a privilege to receive that. But I remember I skipped the assembly. So it's just doing things that normally I wouldn't do. Another red flag. And so I went and I partied instead. And I caught some heat from my parents, but we just swept it under the rug anyway. And so I started getting in some legal trouble pretty early on. Again, I always overshot the mark. And so we had, you know, tough conversations, and it's like, you know, maybe if I was introduced to help then, things would have been different, but it's pointless to speculate. But all the warning signs were there for my friend. I would wake up, no idea what happened the night before, but just, you know, we'd sweep it under the rug and go about our days. And so the first real consequence I think I faced was I was placed on academic probation at Ohio State after my first semester there, or whatever it was. And for me, like, grades were very important, and that was like a wake-up call almost. And so for me, in my addicted mind, like, you know, if alcohol does all this great stuff for me, like, unbeknownst to me, I'm going to protect it at all costs. And so, you know, certainly it couldn't have anything to do with the way that I was living or the way that I was drinking. It had to be other things that explain why I was on academic probation. And so I kind of just wrote it off like it's fine, and I tried the first fix after my first year at Ohio State, which was to transfer. So all of a sudden, like, I'm pushing aside my lifelong dream of graduating from Ohio State to go to University of Cincinnati, because all my credits transferred and they gave me a clean slate on my GPA. But again, just another warning sign of like, hey, is there something bigger going on here? And so after a year and a half at Cincinnati, it's really funny because all the while, you know, I went from drinking a few times in high school to, by the end of my freshman year, I drank almost every night, blacked out almost every night. But in my reality, everybody else was drinking the same way I was, and maybe to a certain extent on a college campus. But you know, when I transferred to Cincinnati, I was like, I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to find the balance between living a life and drinking the way that I want to drink, and I struck that balance somehow. I really don't know how, but after a year and a half, so I had straight A's. I had the highest GPA I could attain at UC at the time. I was named a National Collegiate Scholar. I sat on the board of the Student Advisory Committee. So I made decisions for the student body. You know, I don't know why you want me making. I couldn't make decisions for myself, you know. But so and this other thing, you know, Cincinnati has this great program, a co-op program, where you can secure a job and then work in school and then have a job for when you graduate, and if you're lucky enough to secure one. And so I was lucky enough to secure one of the co-op jobs at a really well-known cable company in the United States. And so for me, this is really like the goose hung high. Like, this is exactly where I thought I would be as a kid from Grandview when I graduated high school. I mean, nothing was really going wrong in my life. However, I really couldn't stay out of legal trouble. So I remember I got a DUI not long after that, lost the co-op. And then from there, it was like consequences just started to pile up. And really, like, you know, for me, the only thing at the time that made sense was just to continue to drink. Then I made the decision to, you know, well, Cincinnati's probably the problem because, you know, believe it or not, I was a horrible probationee. It's really hard to do well on probation if you're not doing the right thing, I found out. And so I wasn't super successful at probation. I kept getting in trouble. Judge mandated that I go to treatment once. But like, so looking back, and I would have not have said this at the time, but the court gave me every tool I needed to be successful. They set me up with counseling, they set me up with IOP, they sent me to inpatient treatment for the first time. But like, for me, I just wasn't willing to hear the lesson at the time, so it doesn't matter who the teacher was, I wasn't gonna hear it. Because for me, in my mind, like a kid from Grandview, a kid with straight A's, National Collegiate Scholar, certainly is not an alcoholic. Like, an alcoholic, drug addict, person that lives under the bridge, begs me for money on the corner, yada yada. And I was just really wrong about that. Like Lewis said, addiction doesn't discriminate. And so I ended up transferring back to Ohio State because being on probation in Cincinnati was the root of my problems, really. And so I ran away again, came back here, and my drinking escalated again because, like, all of a sudden things weren't going the way that I thought they should go anymore. And so I started drinking around the clock pretty much. And it was actually, something happened when I was probably in treatment for the first time that like planted some seeds that like, hey, maybe, you know, my other friends aren't having to go to inpatient treatment. Like, maybe there's something wrong here. And so I remember I was on this just like bender of, I was drunk for, you know, 3-4 weeks straight or whatever. And I came to one morning and I was like, this has got to stop, man. Like, I got to really not drink today. And so I was talking to one of my buddies and I was like, but I feel so bad without alcohol. I don't know what to do. And so it was that day, you know, I got introduced to opiates right here in Grandview. Actually, the first time I got high was right here in Grandview. I just walked over to a house with a few dollars, bought it, used it, and my life changed in that moment. Because it was like, you know, all the euphoria from drinking without like not remembering things and doing and saying really dumb things. And so I, you know, from there, like everybody was amazed, like, cause 6 months later I didn't drink anymore, but it was like my little secret. It's like, wow, I do opiates every day, you know, but nobody can tell. That's what I thought. And so for me, like, my experiences, doesn't matter where you're from, like the life of an opiate addict is pretty linear. And so I went from, you know, I held it together in school for as long as I could. Eventually, like, school was secondary because, like, I'd wake up and withdraw. It just kind of happened too. It was just like I was using, like it was a real casual thing, and then like one day I woke up and I was sick and I got high, and then all of a sudden I wasn't sick anymore. It was like this thing in my head was like, we're gonna make sure that this doesn't happen anymore, because I don't want to feel like that if I don't have to. And so all of a sudden, you know, instead of going to class, you know, I was stealing from stores and yada yada yada, doing that whole deal. And so it's funny because like in high school, I made the This Week in Grandview. I was on the front page because I was first singles in tennis. So there's a picture of me playing tennis, which I thought was pretty cool. So everything came full circle. About 5 years later, I made This Week in Grandview again. But this time I was on the crime beat page, and it was I was arrested for felony burglary of a house in Grandview, which I did, you know, and I deserved to be arrested for that. That for me was like boom, boom, boom. I couldn't not get arrested. I was kind of like Lewis, like I just couldn't stay out of trouble because of the way I was living. I mean, that was my entire day. It was just, it was like something else was in control, because like at my core, I was still the kid that was afraid to steal a bit of honey from El Tombo. But like something else was in control, something else was driving, and it was like, you have to go into this store and steal this stuff and then go sell it, or you're gonna die, is what I felt like. And I knew I wouldn't die, but I just didn't want to feel the way I was feeling. And so I ended up going, you know, back to treatment. My parents tried, God bless them, they tried their best. They figured, you know, let's move them out of that city and put them somewhere else, because there's no drugs other places, right? And wrong, like no matter where I go, I'm gonna find what I want. And so I moved to Pennsylvania, in and out of treatment, stealing a bunch from my parents, stealing a bunch from everybody I could. And so for me, it culminates in like several attempts at rehab. You know, I'd go to rehab, people would think everything was okay, and then I would, you know, start using again, thinking it was a good idea, and well, I can just not get physically addicted this time. But for me, like 1 is too many, 1,000 is not enough. And so I would start, I'd go on a run, it would always culminate in jail or treatment. And so eventually, you know, I got to a pretty lonely place, deservedly so, like nobody wanted anything to do with me. And so for me, I ended up homeless on the streets of York, Pennsylvania. Long story, don't have time for it, but you know, really all I did all day was just like walk around and try to get the next one, really, you know. And for me, it was like in that moment, my brain had convinced me that was really the life that I wanted to live, you know. And like, so I had all these dreams, aspirations, whatever, growing up, but like doing drugs and alcohol, it just completely took over. And so even though I was homeless, living in this park, using every day, I thought that was okay. And so, you know, thank God that like treatment centers don't say you can't come back more than once. So I ended up going back to treatment, and then for the first time in my life, you know, I remember they were doing my intake, and they'd be like, "You've been here a lot, you know, so what's different this time?" And I was like, truthfully, I don't have the answer to that. And they said, that's great, because every other time you've come through here, you always have the answer to what your problem is. And so for me, like I finally listened, and so I went to sober living. I did that whole thing. I did everything they suggested to me, and that's really been like the launching pad to come into like, you know, what I talked about in the beginning, who I am today. You know, and I wouldn't be here without you know, the people in those treatment centers and the other people in recovery that really helped me along. You know, it was, this works as well as I can get out of my own way to let it work. And so I don't know, I'm really grateful to be here. It's interesting because, you know, I grew up right down the street, and I spent a lot of time right over there in the kids section trading Pokemon cards with kids from Grandview. I never expected to be back here in this capacity, but I really am grateful for it, and I appreciate everybody coming out tonight, and I'm really excited to hear from the next panelists.
All right, so first of all, I want to thank Manny personally for that. You know, sometimes there's no better education, right, than hearing it from folks who have done the work and have, you know, walked in those particular shoes. So again, my name is Sheryl Munson, and I am a judge here in Franklin County Court of Common Pleas General Division. Just for a reference, Court of Common Pleas General Division and criminal caseload, we do felony criminal offenses, and then we also run a civil docket, where the amount of dispute of a civil dispute is $15,000 or more. I also run the RISE docket, which I'll talk with you about a little more here shortly, but by way of background, I was born and raised in Marion, Ohio. I was a first-generation college student, first-generation law student. Didn't come from a super secure background, mostly due to my father's addiction to alcohol. So it kept us, sort of economically wanting on a lot of occasions. And he did, had some mental health issues, an alcohol addiction, and some run-ins with the law. And ultimately, he did complete suicide when I was 11 years old. And I think that's super formative for me, because then when I went to law school, the only thing I ever wanted to do was be a public defender. And so I went to the Franklin County Public Defender's Office. I was there for 26 years. My motivation for being there, again, not exclusively my father's experience, but part and parcel, I'm sure, was just this idea that I believe that no matter what anybody has done, they deserve at least one person who cares about what happens to them standing beside them. And so I was, prepared to live and die a public defender. That was my dream. Ultimately, though, it became very apparent that although as public defenders we were doing 80 to 90% of the criminal work in that courthouse, there was not one former public defender on the bench, which was, in my mind, an issue, because that is, a particularly important perspective to have if you're sitting in judgment of folks. You should know where those people are coming from. And know what their life histories are, and value those individuals. And so I did run for judge in 2020 and took the bench then. One of the first things I did was go about creating the RISE docket, as Lewis alluded to. Prior to my taking the bench, the only other specialty docket in common pleas court was the TIES court, which is treatment is essential for success, presided over by the amazing Judge Stephen McIntosh, and that is a substance use docket, and has been in play for a very long time. In fact, when Justice Jennifer Bruner was a common pleas judge, she started that docket. And so when I first took the bench, she was one of the first calls I made, and I said, we need a mental health docket. And she said, absolutely, you need a mental health docket. And so that's what I began to do. I put the mental health docket into place. What it looks like is it's moderate to high risk felony offenders. Unlike some specialty docket, my docket is not a diversion docket in the sense that if you successfully complete my docket, you won't have a criminal offense. My docket is a prison diversion docket. So what we're talking about is folks who are in the justice system. They are involved in the justice system because of a mental health issue and very, if not most often, a co-occurring substance use disorder. And they are there because of that, but they've reached a point where their originally assigned judges don't know what to do, right? They don't want to incarcerate this person because we know, first of all, in this country, sadly, there are more people with mental health issues being housed in jails and prisons than in residential treatment facilities, which is a sad commentary on where we are right now. But anyway, that aside, so that was the goal. Let's create an option where judges can send these folks to me and give us one more opportunity to do some very person-centered, individual treatment plans, a high level of accountability. And I would be absolutely remiss if I didn't not acknowledge Shannon Bradshaw, who is sitting here, who is my mental health coordinator. And Shannon joined my docket probably about a year into the docket, and I can say without reservation that she has innovated this docket to a place that, it makes me very proud, first of all, to work with her, but also the innovation and the work that she does has made this docket what it is. So I never want to forget to acknowledge how amazing you are, okay? So I did that. Now I'm gonna move on, all right. So in any case, and I alluded to the TIES docket. So a lot of times we've got mental health, it's co-occurring with substance use. So we also have to kind of figure out, which is not easy to untangle, is this a substance use issue? Is this an untreated mental health issue? both of those having perhaps, in many, many cases, come from trauma, originally childhood trauma, that brings us to those places. So, but for the most part, if it's clear that it's a substance use issue, you're going to go to the TIES docket. If you have a mental health diagnosis and you are constantly reoffending, and these can be serious offenses. So the way my docket works is if you are eligible for probation, you are eligible for my docket. Unless there is a mandatory prison sentence attached to your crime, you are eligible for my docket. Now, of course, if there's a victim involved in that case, whether or not they come to my docket, the victim is absolutely included in that conversation. But what we know so often is that folks with mental health issues, the people they're victimizing are the people they love. So the people they love don't want to see them go to prison, but they want them to get better, and they want to be not victimized anymore. So many times they're signing off on that. So we have some very high level offenders. But what I want to say is, many folks that come through the door of the courthouse on my regular docket, on the RISE docket, are coming from underserved and marginalized communities. But without a doubt, they're also coming from places like Grandview. As you've heard again and again and again, these issues are absolutely the great equalizer. And so it's important that we meet them where they are and create treatment plans that are relevant to them. We've got to put people in treatment situations. We got to give them peer support with people they can identify with, that they can have conversations with. If I had somebody, maybe coming out of Grandview, maybe I would call Manny and say, can you have a conversation with this person? Because they can relate to you and they can relate to your experiences. And that's so important in healing, right? It's certainly one size does not fit all. But the other situation that we see, I brought my notes or I will get off on a tangent and never come back, is the denial and stigma that we see, particularly in communities like Grandview, better served communities. And because people, these children, are well fed, they're well educated, they're well dressed, they're well traveled, and so it's easy to have those issues masked, and we don't want to talk about it, and we can be in denial about it. And while it's very difficult sometimes to see at first, because those things that are in place can mask those issues, as opposed to somebody maybe coming from a neighborhood where they don't have a roof over their head, they don't have food on the table, you see them wandering around in the street, they have nowhere else to go, they're high in public, so it's easy to spot those folks, right? But then if you have this mask of again, the nice family, the good neighborhood, you can hide for a little bit longer. But again, you cannot hide forever. As Manny told you, it's hard to see at first, but these folks will ultimately become more visible, because addiction will make them more visible, mental health crisis will make them more visible. Again, it being the great equalizer. And one thing that I do have a big concern about is and I'm not speaking about any specific judge or any particular participant, but the justice system as a whole, often when they see people coming from better neighborhoods, who had these privileges, you had a good education, you had this, sometimes there's a little lack of compassion there, right? It's like, what's your problem? We've got kids who are raised, they're living on the street. Your parents have you in a beautiful home in Grandview Heights, Ohio. What is your problem? And they get labeled. They're bad apples, they're weak, they're not trying hard enough. And so we really have to work to avoid that kind of pigeonholing people. So like a lot of times we think about, the stigma we place on individuals who are coming from, places of poverty and other communities, and we're making those judgments about them. But those judgments can be made also about people who are coming from places of privilege. And so we have to make sure that, first of all, we're treating them, again, meeting them where they are, treating them the way they need to be treated, and also giving them the same grace and heal them. Because until we heal them, our communities can't be healed. We have to bring them back to give back to the community, all that they have to offer. So that is a critical task, and
the fact that we're all here talking about it tonight is very encouraging. So thank you.
I just first want to say thank you both to sharing your stories and very personal experiences. I appreciate you being here. So again, I'm JoLynn Wheatley. I'm the Mental Health Specialist here at Grandview Heights. This is going on my 3rd year here. I've been a social worker for over 20 plus years, but my passion has always been in mental health. Previously worked at Children's Hospital in their psych department. And so, yeah, as Lewis mentioned earlier, I'm very passionate, want to help students. And something that Sheryl just talked about, I kind of want to start off with is just that the trauma. We do have kids here in Grandview that have experienced trauma. I worked with some of them. And so a big thing that I want to talk about is just prevention, because I do feel like prevention is key. And one thing regarding just trauma-informed care is we've done some staff trainings. We teach our teachers what to look out for, how to reach out to all of us counselors and mental health specialists in those schools, so that we can have earlier identification on students. And so just to kind of touch on some of the prevention that we're doing here at Grandview, we've really increased our overall prevention and mental health services, especially over the last few years, especially just going into this year. We added another full-time mental health specialist. So not just myself anymore, but we also have another one. And then we also added another full-time school counselor in our high school. And so some of the prevention that we've really increased over the last several years is we do a lot of it's around mental health, but we also do drug and alcohol awareness in our health classes in the middle school. We do a program called Sources of Strength, which actually starts even as low as our 4th graders. And then in the high school and in the middle school, we do the Signs of Suicide program through Children's Hospital, so just early recognition of students who are maybe struggling. We also talk a lot about coping strategies and healthy coping strategies. And I think that's really important to talk about too, because we know there's research that if students have healthy ways of just dealing with their stress, that it lowers their risk for future substance use or making unhealthy decisions. So we do a lot of prevention, just talking to students about ways they can take care of themselves. What are your coping strategies? This year at the high school, we're implementing, it's called Be Present Ohio. It's another program through Children's Hospital, and students will actually have a coping plan once they're done with that. And so just talking through to them who are they connected to, what are their strategies to deal with stress. We are also doing a K-12, we call it connection survey with students. We want to make sure that students have an identified person in the school that they can talk to. I'm not sure which one mentioned something about just like having a connection and having one person in their life that they can go to, and we just want to make sure that students have that. So talking to them about that. And then just the mental health awareness. We also have the Stay Safe, Speak Up hotline. We talk to students about that they can make anonymous reporting. And I think we've seen an increase in just students and teachers coming to us. It's usually around mental health needs, but they come forward and talk to us about students that they're concerned about. And so just raising that awareness. And we also do a lot of talk about see something, say something. So just making sure that students are speaking up when they are saying things out in the community or at school. So something else I wanted to just highlight too is that Grandview, we've really increased our amount of clubs and activities. At the middle school, we have 13 different clubs. At the high school, we have around 37 different clubs. And I think it's just really important to know that that sense of belonging and school belongingness also decreases risks for making negative decisions. And so just knowing that here at Grandview, we really, really increase that and are trying to get every student connected to some type of club or sport. Our theater program is huge in this district as well. And so I just think making sure that students are all connected to something at school that they feel that they have that belonging to. We did hear, Manny mentioned he was in sports. And so I know that there's still that risk, but I think just making sure that they are connected to something that they feel like they have that sense of belonging to. So those are all some of the things that we're doing here at Grandview, and I know that we need to have some time for question and answers as well. But I'm happy to talk to anybody afterwards as well, and if you have questions. As a parent of 2 teenagers myself, I just want to make sure too that we highlight the importance of talking openly to your kids and having those open conversations. What are kids doing outside of school? What are they doing at parties? What are they doing at school functions? So I just think it's really important just to highlight for all the parents out there as well of teenagers, of just making sure that you're having open communication and talks with your kids. Because if you're not, then what is going on behind closed doors. So just being aware of what you're talking to your kids about, and I'm always happy to give resources. Another area that we've really beefed up our just resources as well as just collaboration within the community. I collaborate closely with counselors here in the community. I'm able to give parents resources, and we do a lot of kids are doing telehealth now in the school, so we make sure that they have a place for that. So just if you ever do need resources, I'm happy to connect you, or at least try to reach out to community agencies. And then one other thing I wanted to mention, I think because I know that Sheryl mentioned too, families who are living in poverty or just needing resources. We do have that here in Grandview as well. And so we also are partnering closely with different agencies such as Neighborhood Bridges to make sure that we are helping the whole family system. So not just the students, but if the parents are in need of anything, we're trying to do a lot more of that over these last 2 years as well. And I think that's just important to build up the whole entire family. So just knowing that we do have resources for families here in the Grandview district too. So that's all for me. I think we'll open it up to question and answer, right?
So this is how we end up. Shades of blue.